Hey there. Today I'm filming my first video on this channel and I'm trying my best, but I hope I don't mess it up completely. What I want to do is basically tell you a story, and perhaps it might help you relax or even fall asleep. Sometimes when I'm having trouble to fall asleep, I love listening to relaxing stories or guided meditations. So perhaps this video might help you as well. Today I want to talk to you um, about an event many years ago. It's been around 9 years ago, 8 years, and it's all about how I got started with going into nature. Because many years I've spent going outdoors every weekend and collecting wild edibles, building shelters, making small campfires to prepare that food, and I really, really, really enjoyed it a lot. And today I want to talk to you about how it all got started. So when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I was in 6th grade. A friend of mine, his name is Johannes, approached me and said, Yannick, a different classmate, and Enrico, another classmate, were planning on staying the night in Yannick's shelter. I knew that Yannick was going to the outdoors a lot, and he loves riding BMX. Is that the correct way to say it in English? I don't know. I'm sorry. Those tiny bicycles, anyway, where they make those cool bike tricks. And yeah, I knew that he was going outdoors a lot and climbing, so I was really interested in knowing more about that. To that point, I was only interested in playing football. Yeah, I mean soccer, not American football. That's cool too, but it's not how would the British say, my cup of tea. Anyway, I decided to agree to go along with them, and Yannick lived in a village quite far away from me, so I was always someone who races, or when he rides his bike. I'm just such an impatient person, always race. Till this day. You never see me drive calmly. Never. I don't know why. Anyway, after having ridden or rid, oh, my English is terrible, I'm sorry. For about 2 hours, I finally reached his home, and we had this little how to say. I've got a dictionary right here, an online dictionary, because that way I can basically look things up really quickly. We had a cot, a small cot, and there we basically just threw in all our backpacks. All I had with me was a sleeping bag, an isolation mat, and some food and water. And that was basically enough. What do you want else? I even had a really cheap pocket knife from my father. He bought it in a discounter once. I never really used it. Anyway, Yannick was way better equipped. He had a I don't know, a huge knife. It must have been about 20 centimeters long. Just the blade, and was like that big of a knife. And generally he had all those outdoor clothes, and I was just there in a casual outfit, but that was no problem at all. So anyway, we packed our stuff and headed for the woods. While walking through the woods, I enjoyed it, and we talked a lot. But to that moment, I still wasn't so hooked, basically, to say it like that. So I was like, well, I'm giving this a shot, but it's kind of boring to just walk around, isn't it? But when we approached his shelter, I thought differently. His shelter was amazing. How to describe it? He built it on a rock in the forest, and there was basically a terrace. He built a terrace, a balcony, you could say. I don't know the exact difference. I'm sorry. No, a balcony is when it's above, right? And a terrace is built on the ground, I think. I'm coming across so unintellectually right now. I'm sorry. Anyway, he built this really fancy shelter, um, and I thought it was really cool. So he showed us around, showed us all the features. He even had his toilet corner. So everyone made sure to, not walk through this area at all costs. And yeah, we basically placed all our stuff in the shelter itself. And you can imagine the shelter was built onto the rock. He basically leaned lots of thicker sticks to the rock and tried to isolate it with lots of small branches and leaves that he threw on top of those sticks. So here was the rock, and then there were those sticks and the branches. There was enough space for the four of us. It was really big. It wasn't that functional though, because the more space you have in that shelter, the more space you actually need to isolate, to heaten up in order to have a warm shelter. So it was quite fancy, but it really wasn't functional, and it wasn't isolated well. So you could see bits of light come through, and if light shines through the shelter, you can imagine that rain falls through as well. And at some point it started raining a little bit, and we did get a little wet, but there was no problem. And yeah, anyway, we got out of that shelter, and when the sun, how to say, sorry. At sunset, at sunset, we sat down on that rock. That rock was really big. It was such a cool place, and I wish in my forest there was a place like that, because it was really high. And we sat on the top of that rock during sunset, and we had a pretty nice view. We could see quite far, and that was an amazing moment. And before we sat down, Yannick showed me one plant. It's clover. You know those plants with the fall leaves that it brings you luck. Um, it was a really sour clover, and I believe you call it sorrel. I can just basically look it up, but I'm quite sure. Yes, exactly, sorrel, and it tastes amazing. It's like the snack of the forest. As I were to later find out, there are some other really delicious things you can gather in the woods. For example, the young, do you say sprouts? Let me look it up. The young rungs, it says. Could be. Anyway, the young parts of needle trees that is really light green, way lighter than all the rest of the needles. That just tastes so sour, so delicious. I love it. Anyway, back then I found out about sorrel thanks to Yannick, and it tasted amazing. It was really sour, and he said, "You mustn't eat more than about half a handful of this, because you might get some stomach ache." Well, I gathered a bit more than that, because I always take too much, and I ate it up. I loved it. So I went on the search for more. What it ended up was like 3 hands full of sorrel, and I ate it all in one, how to say, in one row, and it was awesome. So there we were, 4 11 or 12-year-olds sitting on that rock, looking at the sunset, having an awesome view, and me eating sorrel the whole time. And Yannick kept saying, if you keep on eating, you're gonna have such stomach ache. It's gonna be awful, man. And don't annoy me with this then. And I was like, calm down, I got this. And in the back of my mind, I already knew, okay, this isn't really a good idea, but this tastes amazing. I just took the risk. And as it turned out, I didn't have any issues from it whatsoever. So he exaggerated a bit there. Or his stomach is just way too sensitive. I don't know. And yeah, we kept on watching that sunset and talked a bit, and it was really, really nice. Later on, as it got dark, there's just not much you can do. So when you spend the night in the forest, you kind of have to adapt to the day's rhythm. When it gets dark, you go to sleep. And so we did. We went into his shelter, and it was August. It was pretty warm, so we had no problems with the cold. And yeah, we were trying to fall asleep, but I really wasn't used to sleeping in a sleeping bag. I can't think of a single time that I've slept in a sleeping bag before that moment. Afterwards, it was a different thing, but to that point, not really, no. So it was really unusual for me. I was just used to sleeping in beds, so I had troubles falling asleep, but I wasn't the only one. All of us had that problem, apart from Yannick. Yannick was the first to fall asleep, but around about 20 or 30 minutes later, someone of us woke him up because we were also, I don't know, bored in a way. And throughout the whole night, someone fell asleep for like 30 minutes to an hour. Then he woke up again, another one fell asleep. There was always someone to talk to. And yeah, that was the first night that I spent in the forest. And sitting there on that rock and sunset really inspired me a lot. Eating my sorrel was definitely a good thing to do. And I wanted to know lots of things from Yannick about the outdoors, and he kept telling different stories, and it was really, really interesting. And when I got back home the next day, I really didn't sleep much at all. I, not much later, got a book from my aunt about survival, which was quite a coincidence because I've never talked about the outdoors, and I've never really spent much time outdoors before. And it was quite a nice coincidence because at that point, through this event, this overnight stay in the forest, I was really interested. And that's the moment where it all got started. That's the moment where I said, alright, let's do this. And I've read this entire book of, I don't know, 100, 200 pages within 2 days or so. And I kept making lots and lots of notes of what I wanted to do. And then I, bit by bit, started practicing all the things that were written in that book. Most of the times, books that focus on survival, so surviving in an emergency case in nature, are quite, how to say, quite easy, quite entertaining in a way also. Often it's just entertainment. But later on I got to read books on bushcraft. What bushcraft is basically the focus on the ability to be able to live in nature. And that's what I focused on then. So I bought lots of books on wild edibles and first aid, um, if anything happens in the woods. I injured myself a few times, so it was good to know some of those tricks, how to say, some of those safety measures also. And yeah, bit by bit, I got started with all of this, and it got more and more extreme in a way. Never really extreme. I've never spent like a week or so in the outdoors, but we did spend some nights really unprepared on purpose. On purpose. For example, one night what we did is, or one day, we decided to not bring anything along with us and just go into the forest and hike throughout the whole day, sleep on the floor, build our own little shelter with a little bit of isolation from branches or something like that. And the next day we would go back. We wouldn't bring any water along with us, and neither do we bring any food. And yeah, it was hard. It was tough. We later got to find out that that was the hottest day of the year. It was about 4 years ago. Anyway, I think that's a different story. And if you're still awake, I kind of messed up because my focus is to just calm you down. If you didn't plan on falling asleep and you just wanted to calm down, I hope I did a good job in a way. And if you try to fall asleep and you still don't sleep, by now I've probably uploaded a few more videos. So just go ahead. Don't put any pressure on you for not falling asleep yet. And, close your eyes, relax, and at some point, eventually, you'll fall asleep. If you want, like this video and subscribe. If you don't want it, that's okay. I understand. Anyway, have a great day.